Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Farewell, My Lovely by Raymond Chandler, probably my favorite, very favorite crime writer. It's been ages since I last read a Chandler novel and I don't really know why. Recently I've reviewed a few hard-boiled crime novels, Red Harvest and The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett, and in those videos I mentioned how I'm not that much of a puzzle solver, how I'm not good at, and I don't really like the puzzle solving element of the crime genre, you know, keeping track of characters, trying to understand before the narrative does who actually committed the crime, who killed that guy, who killed that woman. I'm not good at that, I suck. But Chandler in particular is one of those writers you don't have to appreciate, you don't have to love that side of the genre in order to be able to appreciate. Number one, because he is hands down, as far as sheer style is concerned, he is one of the best writers of the 20th century. And number two, because he created probably the most compelling detective character of all times, Philip Marlowe, such an irresistible smartass, always has something to say. People are all the time mad at him because he just can't shut up, and he is nasty and he's clever and in an annoying way that makes him kind of a dick, but also makes him absolutely irresistible. In my reviews of Hammett, I mentioned how the intricacy of the plot, how the complex dynamics between all these different crooked characters makes it a bit hard at times to follow the plot. This is not necessarily the case with Farewell, My Lovely. This is a much clearer novel. The complicated element in this novel comes from the fact that this basically has at least two main plots that seem to have nothing to do with each other. Do they have something to do with each other? You'll have to read and discover it by yourself, but for large chunks of the book, Marlowe is basically involved with these two different murders, and you don't really understand how they relate with one another, and often you find yourself, I found myself wondering why he was doing certain things, why he was interrogating people, why he was being a dick to this woman or this man, and I didn't really know if that was relevant to one or the other of the two plots. That, I'm sure, has something to do with the fact that Chandler wrote this novel by cannibalizing, as he said, on existing short stories. So there's a reason why these different plots exist in lead this type of parallel life. But again, even if at certain times you get lost, even if at certain times you can't really understand why Marlowe is doing what he's doing, this is always a pleasure to read, even just to experience Chandler's amazing dialogue. The life of Los Angeles elite is portrayed beautifully. It gives you an idea of how these super rich people lived in a world that was completely different from the world of of common people, how they basically had could do a little bit of what they wanted, how their life was ruled by completely different dynamics than your everyday guy or girl. These, in a way, being a book from the 40s, these has some outdated sides. There's some racial slurs in here against African Americans, against Italians, but at the same time you could read this book, and I encourage personally to read this book as a testimony of the time. At one point, there's been a murder, an African-American man has been murdered, and basically Marlowe says in a sarcastic tone, well, since he was an African-American man, I'm sure that there's not going to be that much of a fuss. And you can reflect on, those dark sides of American society, on whether those sides of American life have changed. How have they changed in the course of the 20th century? A staple of the hard-boiled detective novel is the femme fatale, the lethal woman, and you get a good example, or one or two good examples of that trope in this novel too. I should probably mention that there's also an amazing woman character in this novel called Anne Riordan. She's the daughter of a policeman, she helps Marlowe throughout the narrative, and she's completely kick-ass. And my one complaint with the novel is that I wanted her to have so much more page time, whereas, especially in the second half of the book, she doesn't come up that often, and that was a pity. She was amazing. I hope she'll come back in the next Marlowe novel, but I'm not sure the Marlowe series works like that. At the end of the day, as always, the great greatest thing about Chandler are his last 4 or 5 pages. I'm a sucker for endings, and Chandler's endings are always heartbreaking, and they're filled with so much lyrical beauty and so much tenderness, and it's kind of a staple nowadays. It's kind of a given that the hard-boiled detective genre, sure, offers this bleak view on humanity, this view of society as inevitably corrupted, while at the same time being a very romantic genre. You know, the very fact that this main character exists, that a guy such as Marlowe does all he does because of a sense of justice, betrays maybe not really an optimistic view on life, but a hopeful view on life. If you want pessimism, compare a genre such as the detective novel, the hard-boiled detective novel, with Lovecraftian horror. That's actual pessimism. That's actual, you know, nothing matters, everything meaningless, the universe is going to end horribly. Here, though, these last few pages, Chandler's last few pages, betray all that tenderness of that vision, all that faith in ideals such as love, in ideals such as affection, personal connections between people, the fleetingness of life and the tragedy of such fleetingness. And the last 2 lines of this novel capture a feeling, capture the sadness of it all that tenderness that is ruined in such a bleak world, in a way that really, had you taken Tolstoy, had you put Tolstoy in Los Angeles for a few years, he wouldn't have been able to write those 2 lines as well. It's truly a masterpiece in its own genre, and it's a great novel no matter how you look at it. I absolutely encourage you to read it. Do begin with The Big Sleep if you've never read Chandler, and let me know what you think about Farewell My Lovely, about Chandler in general, in the comments below. Thank you for watching as usual, and bye guys.